All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And as I continue to steamroll through things leading up to the start of a new college football campaign, I want to take this time out to talk about all things in the Pac 12 for the upcoming season. And of course, the Pac 12 for 2024 and 2025 has basically been the de facto Pac 2 as Oregon State and Washington State have been left rather to carry or attempt to carry the Pac 12 banner. And first and foremost, before I talk about how I feel the upcoming college football season is going to look for both the Beavers and Cougars, credit to them because when everybody else left the Pac 12, they just basically, expected, and a lot of people, not even involved, expected Oregon State and Washington State to roll over and die. And of course, the Ducks, pardon me, the Beavers, excuse me, and Cougars have not done that as they've worked very hard to, restore their league. And of course, we know going into next year, Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, Fresno State, and San Diego State are all leaving the Mountain West to join Washington State and Oregon State in the new Pac 12. And then, of course, Texas State is going to be leaving the Sun Belt to join the new Pac 12. And then, of course, Gonzaga is going to be there as well. So, Gonzaga does not have a football program, but nonetheless, the Pac 12, like I've said before, and I'll give them their props once again, they've rolled up their sleeves and went to work on that. But nonetheless, looking here at the present for the upcoming college football season for both Oregon State and Washington State, as this is their last college football campaign before reinforcements come to their league. And of course, you look at the Beavers, okay, and they really, and I mean really, had the brakes beaten off of them last year in the transfer portal. I mean, they lost their head coach, Jonathan Smith, who, was an alum at OSU. He was a part of that Fiesta Bowl. Matter of fact, he was a starting quarterback during that 2000 season when Oregon State went 11-1 and knocked off Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. Nonetheless, he left after the 2023 season for Michigan State. We saw this squad just be decimated, okay, via the transfer portal. One name that comes to mind, Damian Martinez, their star running back from 2023, who went to Miami, just to name a few, okay. And, we saw Trent Bray come in last year and take over for Jonathan Smith. His first year as Oregon State's head coach. Of course, he had been on the Oregon State staff, since 2018. Okay, first as linebackers coach, then defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. The Beavers had their ups and downs last year. They went 5-7, and I think, in my opinion, I think they're ready to survive because this time around, Oregon State was able to use the transfer portal to their credit. They brought in Malik Murphy, former Texas quarterback, also spent last year at Duke. And, you just got to wonder if the seas are starting to calm a little bit in Corvallis around this Oregon State team. They've still got talent there, okay? I like running back Anthony Hankerson as well as wide receiver Trent Walker, and they've got some experience on the offensive line. I also like this Beavers defense, which includes strong safety Skylar Thomas. And I'm looking at Oregon State's schedule. Okay. They've got some winnable games this year, here. And I think, this has the makings of being a much more positive college football campaign for Oregon State. They open up against Cal. And of course, these two go back to their days in the original, Pac 8, then Pac 10 and Pac 12. It's one of those where that's an opportunity for Oregon State to come out and make a statement in that game against Cal and say, hey, you know what? 2025 is not going to be 2024. And then, of course, they follow that up by hosting Fresno State in their second game of the season. So, of course, the folks in Corvallis get a bird's eye view of a new member of the Pac 12 in the Bulldogs. Two tough games for remaining in the month of September for Oregon State. They got to go to Lubbock and they got to take on Texas Tech. And there are a lot of people who are high on the Red Raiders this year in the Big 12. And then, of course, the Apple Cup. And I like you, I've got to get accustomed to seeing the Apple Cup being played early on in the season because for so many years, I grew up on watching Oregon and Oregon State get it on to end the regular season. But nonetheless, the Beavers will be in Eugene to take on the Ducks. There's some winnable games in the middle of that schedule for Oregon State. They've got Houston at home. They got to go to App State. They've got Wake Forest at home, and they welcome back a familiar face in that contest because Jake Dickert, the former Wazoo head coach, is now at Wake Forest, and then they've got Lafayette, and then of course the aforementioned Washington State. And this time around, the Beavers and Cougars do play each other twice this year. Okay, so they begin the month of November against each other in Corvallis, and then they're going to finish the month of November in Pullman. So it's a very manageable schedule for Oregon State. I like their chances to navigate through it. And, I say at the very least 8 wins for the Beavers this year. Then there's Washington State. This was the team that went 8-5 last year, but don't get me wrong, Washington State had their fair share of losses after the 2023 season, kind of like Oregon State did. But then it went to another level last year or after last season. I mentioned Dickert. He left Washington State to take over at Wake Forest. And, Jake Dickert, he was building something little by little there. And of course, for his sake, I feel like he just saw a better opportunity and he exited stage right. Along with Jake Dickert leaving, the Cougars also lost their starting quarterback, John Mateer, to the University of Oklahoma. So now Washington State, they've got to try to find a way to figure it out. They brought in Jimmy Rogers to be their new head coach. And of course, he produced a darn good record at South Dakota State at the FCS level, 27-3 there. And, I feel like the folks at Washington State are hopeful that Jimmy Rogers can give them some stability at the head coaching spot. And I think he's just the guy for this program. He's going to build it, in my opinion, and his through his vision. It's going to take a little bit of time, and I think it might be a situation where Wazoo takes it on the chin at times this season. They open up with Idaho at home before they host San Diego State, and just like it was with the folks in Corvallis, the folks in Pullman get to see early on in the season a new member of the Pac-12 come into town in San Diego State. They're at North Texas on the 13th of September before they host Washington on the 20th. And of course, if anybody remembers that contest last year, Cougars and Huskies took place in Seattle at Lumen Stadium or Lumen Field. And it was one of those where, it had an electric atmosphere, and Washington State had that, not on my watch mentality. And they went out there and stuffed the Huskies. So I really want to see what goes on in the Apple Cup this time around. And of course, just like I mentioned for the Civil War with Oregon and Oregon State, it's still weird to see Wazoo and Washington playing each other so early in the year. But nonetheless, I've got to get accustomed to it. They're at Colorado State to end the month of September. Of course, that is going to be a new member of the Pac-12 for next year. They got a bye week before they travel to Oxford to take on Ole Miss, which is not going to be an easy game. They follow that up by going to Charlottesville the following week to take on Virginia out of the ACC before they return home to finish the month of October against Toledo out of the MAC. Like I said before, Oregon State and Washington State will play each other twice in the month of November as they bookend that, and sandwiched in between those two games against the Beavers, Washington State, they host Louisiana Tech before they're on the road against James Madison. The bottom line is, you know what? Like I said, to their credit, Washington State and Oregon State, they're surviving this thing. And you know what? They found some schools to come on board with them and be a part of the new Pac-12. I wish them nothing but the best. Hopefully, that league is going to be able to flourish with them. And let's see if they can get some other schools on board with them potentially. I'm hearing rumors, but I'm not going to sit up here and talk about rumors unless I really know something that's going to be a little bit more concrete, if you will. But nonetheless, I think that the Beavers and Cougars will swap positions this year. Washington State, of course, was the program last year that finished with the winning record, while Oregon State didn't. I think Oregon State finishes with a winning record this year. It's going to be a little bit tougher for Washington State, in my opinion. I thought, like a lot of people did, like Jake Dickert was going to be there for the long haul, in Pullman. Of course, that wasn't the case, but I truly do think Jimmy Rogers is the right guy for this job, and he's going to take the reins, for Washington State. And like I said, he's going to build this program in his image. Trent Bray's been there; he has a year under his belt, and I think getting a quarterback like Malik Murphy, who's played, at the FBS level at big time schools, I think that is definitely going to be helpful for the Beavers program this year. But like I said, nonetheless, Oregon State and Washington State are there. They've got reinforcements coming. I'm looking forward to the new Pac-12, and I want to see how this thing works out. And also, I want to see how things work out on the gridiron for this upcoming season for the Beavers and Cougars. But I don't know about you, but I'm definitely excited. So let's see how things work out in 2025 for Oregon State and Washington State. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. And as I continue this march through the month of August, leading up to the start of the new college football season, definitely continue to check out this channel. You can check out this channel tomorrow for a recording of my projections for the upcoming college football season in the Sun Belt Conference. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. And the same could be said about Instagram, where you could check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you could check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating groups going around on social media. And just a final tidbit. Like I said, going to be talking about the Sun Belt tomorrow. So for all of you Pac-12 fans, definitely want to pay attention to that because, of course, Texas State, at least for the 2025 college football season, is still in the Sun Belt, but we know that they are moving to the Pac-12 for 2026. So, of course, that is going to be somebody who's going to be on the radar for all of you Oregon State and Washington State fans out there as well. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.